2 winters ago, I was sleeping in a 2009 Ford Taurus in a Walmart parking lot outside Reno, Nevada, with a sleeping bag rated for 40 degrees and a night that dropped to 28. I remember the specific sound of my own breath fogging up the inside of the windshield, and I remember thinking, with total clarity, at 66 years old, William, this is not a rough patch. This is your actual life now. Last month I signed a title deed at a land office in Chiang Mai, Thailand, for a condominium unit with my name on it in black ink. No landlord, no lease, no car door between me and the weather. Same man, same set of hands, 2 years apart. And I want to walk you through every single step of what happened in between, because I think a lot of you watching this are closer to that parking lot than you'd ever say out loud. If you're new to this channel, hit subscribe, because I don't sugarcoat any of this. The bad parts are the good parts, and I think that honesty is exactly what people in a hard spot actually need, instead of another highlight reel. Let me tell you how a 66-year-old man ends up in a Walmart parking lot, because it's rarely one dramatic thing. It's usually 4 or 5 ordinary things stacking on top of each other until the floor gives out. I'd worked 38 years as a commercial electrician in Nevada, good steady union work for most of it, running conduit and pulling wire through buildings all over Washoe County. The kind of career where you drive past your own handiwork for decades without anyone ever noticing it's there. Then the company I'd been with for the last stretch got absorbed by a bigger outfit, and at 61, with a bad shoulder from decades of overhead work, I wasn't the guy they wanted to keep around. I collected unemployment, then nothing. My wife Carol had passed 6 years before that, cancer, and the house we'd owned together got sold in the estate settling, which left me with less equity than I'd expected once the lawyers and the back taxes took their cut. I moved into an apartment, then a cheaper apartment. Then, when my Social Security finally kicked in at 66, a little over $7,750 a month, I discovered that a cheaper apartment in that part of Nevada didn't actually exist anymore, not one I could afford on that number. My daughter Jenny was in Ohio with 3 kids of her own and a mortgage that ate every dollar of what she and her husband made. I stayed on a buddy's couch for 4 months, a good man named Dale from my old union local, until his own situation changed and I couldn't keep asking. And that's how, at 66 years old, a man who'd paid taxes and worked with his hands for 4 decades ended up parking a car outside a Walmart, because they don't run you off overnight the way some lots do. I want to be straight with you about what those 7 months were actually like, because there's a sanitized version of homelessness people tell, and a real one, and I'd rather give you the real one. It's not just cold and uncomfortable, it's the particular exhaustion of never fully sleeping, because part of your brain stays on watch all night. It's washing up in gas station bathrooms with paper towels and hoping nobody bangs on the door. It's the specific shame of a woman at a food bank recognizing you from church 3 years back, and neither of you knowing what to say about it. There was one night in December, temperatures down near 20 degrees, when a security guard at the Walmart, a young kid maybe 25, tapped on my window not to move me along, but to hand me a thermos of coffee he'd bought with his own money on his break, and told me his grandfather had done a stretch like this after the 2008 crash, and then he just walked back inside like it wasn't anything. I still think about that kid more than I think about most people I knew for years back home. I want you to know, If you're watching this in your own car right now, in your own version of that Walmart lot, that I see you. And none of what I'm about to describe erases what you're going through right now. It just means there might be a door out that nobody's told you about. The door for me opened at the public library in Reno, which became my daytime headquarters, mostly because it was warm, had bathrooms, and let me charge my phone. A caseworker from a senior services nonprofit, a woman named Patrice, ran a weekly drop-in table there, mostly helping people navigate SNAP benefits and Medicaid paperwork. I wasn't looking for anything more than a warm hour and maybe a granola bar the first time I sat down across from her. But Patrice asked me one question that nobody else had bothered to ask in months, which was simply, William, if money weren't the problem, where would you actually want to be right now? And I said, half joking, somewhere it doesn't get to 28 degrees in a parking lot. She laughed, but she also wrote something down, and the next week she slid a printed page across the table, an article about American retirees living on Social Security alone in Southeast Asia. I want to be honest, my first reaction was suspicion, because everything that had approached me in the last year with the word opportunity attached to it had turned out to be garbage. But Patrice wasn't selling me anything. She just said, I've had 2 other clients look into this. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm telling you it exists. Comment down below if you've ever had one small piece of information, from a stranger or otherwise, completely redirect your life. Because I think that moment with Patrice is the hinge this entire story turns on, and I don't think people give those moments enough credit. I spent the next 3 months doing research on library computers, which is its own kind of humbling. Sitting in a public building researching how to leave the country you'd spent your whole life in because you couldn't afford to keep living in it. Timing my sessions around the branch's opening hours and getting territorial, in a way that embarrassed me even then, about my corner terminal near the window. I learned about the Thai retirement visa, the non-immigrant OA, available to anyone 50 and older, requiring either 800,000 baht, about $22,000, sitting in a Thai bank account, or a monthly income of about 65,000 baht, roughly $1,800, which my Social Security check actually cleared, just barely. I didn't have $22,000. I had, when I finally added up everything left after 2 years of scraping, about 6,400s to my name, most of it sitting untouched in an old retirement account I hadn't been able to bring myself to touch, plus whatever I could get for the Taurus. That gap between the $22,000 the visa wanted and the $6,400 I actually had was the single biggest obstacle in this entire story. Bigger than the flight. Bigger than the fear. I found the answer in a Facebook group with about 60,000 members, mostly older Americans and Brits either living in Thailand or planning to. When somebody explained the income-based route clearly for the first time, if you can document $1,800 or so a month in pension or Social Security income, you don't need the $22,000 lump sum at all. My Social Security check qualified. I read that sentence about 4 times before I let myself believe it. I sold the Taurus for $2,900. I cashed out what remained of that old retirement account, which after the early withdrawal penalty and taxes left me with less than I wanted to think about, but enough. Dale drove me to the airport in Reno, and neither of us said much on that drive, because we both knew what the last 7 months had actually been, even if we'd mostly joked our way through them out loud. the two of us trading the kind of gallows humor men our age use, instead of actually talking about how scared we'd both been. At the gate he shook my hand the way you'd close out a job you'd worked side by side on for years, and then uncharacteristically, he hugged me, hard, and said, "Don't you dare come back here broke, William. Come back rich or don't come back at all." I've sent him a photo from Chiang Mai every single month since, partly to prove I was keeping my end of that joke, and partly because he's the reason I had 4 months of a roof at all before any of this started, and a man doesn't forget that. I landed in Bangkok with a duffel bag, $3,100 in cash divided between 3 different pockets out of pure paranoia, and an address for a guest house in Chiang Mai I'd booked for 2 weeks, the absolute outer limit of what I could afford while I figured out the rest. Chiang Mai in October hit me the way I imagine landing on another planet would hit a person. The heat first, thick and immediate. Then the smell, incense and diesel and something frying. Then the sheer volume of motorbikes moving in patterns that seemed like chaos until you watched long enough to see they weren't. I found a room to rent within the first week, a basic studio for 6,500 baht a month, about $180, which on its own felt like a miracle after paying $1, $400 for a 1-bedroom back in Reno that I could no longer afford. I want to tell you plainly, that first year I was still scared constantly, just a different flavor of scared than the parking lot kind. I was scared of running out of money in a country where I didn't speak the language and had no Dale to call. I ate rice and eggs more nights than I'll pretend was a lifestyle choice, but I wasn't cold. I wasn't watching a gas station door at 2 in the morning. That distinction mattered more than I can properly explain to somebody who's never lived both sides of it. The turn toward actually owning something happened slowly, almost by accident, through a Canadian expat named Frank I met at a coffee shop near the moat. A retired postal worker who'd bought a small condo unit here 8 years earlier for what he described at the time as less than a used truck. Frank explained something to me I hadn't understood at all before landing here, which is that Thailand lets a foreigner own a condominium unit outright. Freehold, your name on the title, deed exactly like a Thai citizen, no company structure, no lease. No workaround, provided the building hasn't already sold 49% of its total floor space to other foreigners, which is the legal cap. What you cannot own, ever, as a foreigner, is the land itself, which is why houses and villas here get leased instead of bought. But a condo unit, the actual apartment, can be yours in the fullest legal sense the country allows a foreigner to hold. Frank walked me through it over 2 cups of coffee like he was handing me a set of directions he wished somebody had handed him. I started saving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I picked up part-time work nobody back home would have hired a 67-year-old for, teaching basic English conversation 2 evenings a week at a language center, which paid modestly but consistently, about 400 baht an hour. Let me actually break down what that year and a half looked like month to month, because the shape of it matters more than the total. My Social Security check landed at $1,150. Rent on the studio was $180. Electric and water together rarely broke $35, even running the air conditioner most nights, because Chiang Mai doesn't punish you for cooling a room the way a Nevada summer would. Food, eating mostly at local stalls and cooking simple things at home, ran somewhere around $150 a month. My teaching income added another $220 to $260 depending on the month. Added up, and I was living on roughly $400 a month total and banking the rest, somewhere between $1,300 and $1,500 every single month, which is a number I would have called impossible a year earlier, sitting in that Taurus doing a very different kind of math. I lived carefully. I skipped the beer nights with Frank and the other expats more often than I joined them, which cost me some easy friendship in the short term, but built the number I needed. After roughly a year and a half of that discipline, I had close to $19,000 saved, plus what remained of that original nest egg, enough to start actually looking at units instead of just dreaming about them. The condo I found was a small one-bedroom, 32 square meters, in an older but well-kept building about 15 minutes from the old city by Songthu, the shared red trucks that pass for public transit here. Before I let myself get attached to it, the lawyer I'd hired ran a check with the building's juristic office to confirm the foreign ownership quota, since Thai law caps foreign freehold ownership at 49% of a condominium building's total floor area. And if that quota's already full, a foreigner can only lease within the building, not own outright. This particular building had room left in its quota, which the lawyer confirmed in writing before we went any further, along with a check that the building itself was properly registered as a condominium under the Condominium Act, and not one of the unregistered apartment buildings that look identical but can't legally convey foreign freehold title at all. The asking price was $1,850,000 baht, which came to just over $52,000, more than my total savings. But the seller, an aging Australian expat moving back to be near his grandkids, was motivated and willing to work with me directly on a payment structure that a Thai lawyer I hired reviewed and made sure protected both of us. I paid a substantial chunk up front from my savings and structured the remainder as private seller financing over 3 years at a fixed rate, which the lawyer registered properly, so there'd be no ambiguity about what I owed or what I'd own once it was paid. Every baht of that purchase had to come into Thailand from overseas, which meant wiring the funds through my old Nevada bank account and getting a foreign exchange transaction form from my Thai bank confirming the money's origin, a piece of paper that turned out to be the single most important document in the entire transaction, because without it the land office won't register a foreigner's name on a title deed at all. The day of the actual transfer, I sat in a plastic chair at the Chiang Mai land office for nearly 3 hours, watching a clerk process paperwork in a language I still only partially understood. Frank beside me the whole time because I'd asked him to come as a witness and a translator both, and an official from the seller's side flipping through a folder thick enough that at one point I genuinely wondered if something had gone wrong. Though it hadn't, it was simply how much paper it takes to move a piece of Thailand's economy from one name to another. When she finally slid the shanote, the title deed, across the counter with my name printed on it in Thai script alongside the English, I did not do anything dramatic. I did not cry, though I'd half expected to. I just sat there for a long moment looking at my own name on a piece of government paper that meant, for the first time in 5 years, nobody could tell me to leave. Frank had to nudge me to sign the last line. I called Jenny that night, my daughter in Ohio, and read her the address slowly over the phone like it was a magic spell, which in a way it was. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Dad, say it again." And I did. And I heard her start crying on the other end, in that specific way people cry when relief finally catches up to fear that's been sitting in them for years. She'd known about the Walmart parking lot, because I'd finally told her the truth about it 8 months in. Once I couldn't keep pretending the temporary situation I kept describing on our calls was temporary at all. She'd known about Dale's couch. She hadn't known, until that call, whether any of it would ever actually resolve into something solid, and I don't think I'd fully known it either. Not until I heard my own voice saying the street name out loud and realizing nobody was going to take it away from me in the morning. I want to tell you honestly what it's like now, because the ending of a story like this isn't a montage. It's a Tuesday. I wake up in my own bedroom, in my own condo, with a small balcony that gets morning light through a row of banana trees the building's gardener tends every week. Most mornings I walk down to a noodle stall 2 blocks away run by a woman named Auntie Meow, who charges me 45 baht for a bowl of cow soy, and has stopped even asking what I want, just brings it. I teach my English classes 3 evenings still, partly for the income and partly because I like the kids, and partly because idle hands got me into trouble with my own thoughts back in that Reno parking lot, and I've learned to keep them occupied. There's a boy in my Tuesday class, maybe 10, named Ohm, who asked me once if it was true that in America everyone lived in a car, because he'd seen it in a movie, and I had to sit with that question a lot longer than he expected before I answered him, honestly, that sometimes it is true, and that I was one of the people it had been true for. Frank and I still get coffee, though now it's less about survival and more about friendship, which is its own kind of luxury I don't take for granted. I keep a photo of Carol on the dresser, and some nights I talk to it the way you do, telling her about the condo, telling her I finally have a door that locks again. I don't know what she'd have made of Thailand. I like to think she'd have argued with the fruit vendors over 10 baht, just for the sport of it, the way she used to haggle at every yard sale in Nevada on pure principle. Not because we ever needed to save the $2. If there's one thing I'd say to anybody watching this from inside their own car tonight, cold, ashamed, convinced this is just how the rest of your life looks now, it's that the distance between a parking lot and a title deed with your name on it is not as far as it feels at 2 a.m. It took me 2 years, a stranger named Patrice who asked the right question, a Canadian named Frank who explained a system nobody back home ever mentions, a security guard's thermos of coffee that cost him maybe $3 and meant more than that to me, and a willingness to sit in a plastic chair for 3 hours watching my whole life get rebuilt one stamp at a time. I still keep a folded photo of that Ford Taurus in a kitchen drawer, not as a scar I'm nursing, but the way you'd keep a photo of a storm you actually made it through, proof for the version of me that sometimes still wakes up at 3 a.m. Out of old habit, checking a door that these days is already locked from the inside. It is not a fast door, but I promise you, it is a real one. I'm William. Thank you for listening to Retirement Without Borders.